Welcome to Rooted and Rising, a soulful podcast hosted by Dr. Cheri and Ellice Boone. Join the conversation as Dr. Cheri and Ellice explore the transformative power of holistic healing from the inside out. Together, they guide listeners through the deep work of reconnecting with their roots, uncovering the unconscious wounds that shape us, and rising into the fullness of our higher selves. So please, welcome the hosts of Rooted and Rising, Dr. Cheri and Ellice Boone.
Hello, welcome to Rooted and Rising. You're here with Dr. Cheri and my co-host, Ellice Boone. Welcome, Ellice.
Thank you.
I just have to ask, have you ever sat down and thought with yourself, what happens when love is not just a feeling? But you're recognizing you have to make a choice. You're asked to make these choices sometimes over and over again, especially when maybe it'd be easier not to love. It'd be easier to hate. And you're expected to. You feel like you need to overgive and you need to walk away. And what happens when that occurs for you? Really, love is actually a very powerful energy force. And when we transmute it through a feeling, we do get overworked. We do overgive. We do resent. We do probably really hate and deluding ourselves, saying that, calling it love. Yet, when we can step back and step into that loving energy that is already within us, when we can experience its power, which is a vibration that is so sweet and ever expanding, then that is where we begin to embody what I call embodying love. And what embodying love is, we remember the love that we are. Remembering love is beautiful. And it's the beauty of who we are, and it becomes a teacher. And then integration is a teacher, right? And it begins to stay with us. And then we take it one extra step and we embody something that's something more. And that more is what we want to talk about today. We want to, be able to ask ourselves, can we choose love when fear resurfaces? Can we always have it? Versus when we want to hate, can we be love? Can we want to overgive? Can we set boundaries and feel love, experience love, be love? When we have to enter back into our daily life, and those relationships that pull us in with those same old patterns, can we be present in our love? This can take some courage. And we're going to talk about the embodiment and the courage that it takes today, which is not force, quite the opposite. We're going to talk about, the power of discernment, because, we can say we feel things, we intuit things. Discernment is just one more level up, and it's beyond the opposite of self-sacrifice. And when we embody love, we include our truths. We include what I call sacred boundaries, not just the day-to-day boundaries of life script in the moment, and we also encompass the virtue of patience. So kind of a big, maybe hopefully not too heavy episode, but I think very important. And so I hope that, as we delve into this, you will stay curious and dig a little deeper in self-awareness.
Thank you, Dr. Cheri. That was such a great summary of kind of the meat of what we want to talk about today. And as always, before we dive into our conversation about this topic, we love to get our listeners and viewers started with a little gentle meditation. So if you can find yourself in a quiet and private space, we ask that you just take a moment to do so, somewhere where you can be uninterrupted for the next 5 minutes or so. And so now here in your space, I want you to just kind of get comfortable in your seat, wherever you're sitting, and just take a moment to close the eyes if that feels safe for you. And if it feels good to place a hand on your heart and one on your belly, you're going to be connecting with this feeling of love. So here with the hand on the heart and one on the belly, taking your first really deep breath in through the nose and then out through the mouth. Letting your shoulders soften here and noticing the weight of your body as it's held in the chair or on the ground. Feeling your whole body melt just a little bit more. Taking another deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. You don't need to fix or change anything here, just allowing yourself to soften. And now I want you to bring into mind the word love, whatever that represents to you, allowing any visions to come forward. And then taking away the idea of what love is and just allowing it to be an experience within your body. What does love feel like? Noticing any gentle sensations. What does love feel like in your body when it's aligned, when it's mutual, when it's safe? Breathing into this feeling here. Just taking note of how your body responds to feeling love. Another deep breath in, just savoring that feeling within the body. And if it's in one place, if you can identify a place in your body where that love feels most present, just imagine that love expanding, kind of like a warm, soft light glowing from that place and expanding to reach all parts of your body. Breathing this in here, enjoying the feeling. And now I'd like you to bring in another word, another idea, and that word is boundary. Now see if you can feel this not as a wall or something solid, but more of a faint line. And that line resembles a sort of self-respect. A boundary is simply a place where you end and another begins. So maybe noticing the outlines of your body and putting meaning to that outline as the boundary between you and anything else. A boundary can also feel like the safety and protection of your no. Notice what that feels like in your body when you say in your mind or out loud the word no firmly. Give yourself a moment here to play with that word, perhaps saying it in a different tone, finding your confidence, finding your firmness. finding your boundary. Notice if there's any subtle shifts here in the body as you honor a boundary that supports you, as you speak your no, as you hold your truth. And just let yourself take in for a moment and register this response in your body. What it feels like to have a clear and spoken boundary. Boundaries are here to give us protection, to keep us in alignment, and to gently remind us not to abandon ourselves. If it feels right for you, take another breath here and silently say to yourself, love, true love, will never require me to abandon myself or any part of myself. Taking another deep breath here. Noticing the warmth of your hand if it's still placed on your heart and your stomach. Noticing the rise and fall of your breath. And when it feels good for you, slowly coming back into the room that you're in. Maybe allowing the eyes to have a soft focus, gently flutter open, and coming back into the space. Thank you for joining us on that little journey of finding a little snippet of love and feeling what a boundary, a healthy boundary can feel like. Surprising how this very simple act can be pretty powerful for people, especially when we're not used to expressing our no very often. So I hope you found it uh, insightful, but also whatever came up for you, just encouraging gentleness and love to every part and every piece that you experienced.
Thank you, Lise, as always. That is beautiful. And that was beautiful. And I think, we can never do that too much. I feel like we're rushing around and we forget to love ourselves and we forget to love, and I think many of us have forgotten what our loving energy, how that's experienced in this world. And so that was just a beautiful way to experience a nugget of it. And so I could go and do it several times today. So thank you. Really such a gift.
Yeah, and I encourage our listeners to do that any time of day. We always include these practices in our podcast because we also benefit from it as well to just come to a little bit more presence and slowing down. As you said, we're always running around. So to come back to a
Right.
presence and just take a moment for ourselves to give ourselves a little bit of love is really important. So hopefully you can take something from any of these practices, even if it's just that moment of peace and slowing down, and take that with you for the rest of your day.
And I think this is really key to, the beginning of understanding what we're going to talk about today of embodiment,
Mhm.
and we spent a lot of time on integration and it feels like that's the end of the road. But I really want listeners to like take this in as one step further into delving into their ideal self. So I'm
Mhm.
excited about the topic today. And I know we have a sponsor to go to right now. So let's just go to our sponsor and come back. Got a lot of exciting stuff. See you in a minute.
Mike Zorek, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a 6-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorick, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorick has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Hi, welcome back to Rooted and Rising. I'm Elise, and this is Dr. Cheri. And today we're diving into the topic of basically embodying love. And it's interesting because I think that a lot of us feel we understand love and we have this idea of what it is for us. But this piece about embodying love, that kind of feels like a very different marker. That is something that we have to live in our lives. And so that means when things are getting hard, when we're falling back into these like old relational patterns, this is where we get to practice really embodying love. And it goes deeper than that, as we're going to dive into more. It's not just about always being loving and happy and, it's about loving ourselves just as much as it is about loving other people. And so this is why we're going to dive into the topic of boundaries as well, because often we think that love should just be always encompassing. And yet sometimes love is creating boundaries. Sometimes love is walking away. Sometimes it is making hard decisions. So we're kind of diving into all of that today. And I think it's important because a lot of the work that we've talked about, people doing different medicine journeys or different therapeutic modalities, they'll have these breakthroughs and they'll feel like, okay, I'm this happy, joyful, loving person now. And then they'll come back into their life and here they are in their relationships. We touched on this in our last podcast. And it feels like, oh no, everything out the window. They go back into those old patterns. And it's a hard thing to adjust to and to understand that it's not just these insights that change us, that we have to make a conscious choice to be embodied and a conscious choice to have love. So, sorry if you can hear my dog barking. Dr. Cheri, I just wanted to touch on this a little bit more. If you can, why insight alone doesn't just change our behavior and why we need more conscious choice with embodiment.
Passive, one of our greatest gifts in life, about being human beings is we have free will. And with free will comes the power of choice. And, when we truly, we think we make choices all the time, but when we take a moment and we tap into, I call it, our divine agency, we remember that, that who we are. We tap into that higher self, which I like to call the ideal self. And because, referring to is, again, the I am in us. And as we stay present and in that embodiment, we experience this love, which is remembering who we are. And when we can remember, then we can break through all the stories that we kind of navigate through day-to-day life, and all the actions, reactions that are required. And we can slow down and be in the present to enter a proactive way of being. And this is all the theory we talked about in previous episodes about becoming, and this becoming is, we step into that, I call emotional honesty, where we can be, another way of saying it, impeccable with our word, which we're being not honest with the world around us. We're first being honest with ourselves. And this is so freeing, because we are kind of like raising, that's why raising the vibration of our whole being, and getting just a little glimpse, if we don't already have it, of what our higher self really can reflect to this world and into this environment. And so it's not something that just happens because we have insight. It's a process, one day at a time. And we talk about healing with integration, not being linear. This is non-linear as well. It's all part of it, right? We're just breaking things down so that you can have some conceptualization of the capacity we're able to embrace as we grow in this world. And it is a day by day, and we need to have a lot of patience. This is where that sacred patience, comes from. It's being patient with ourselves, learning what um, you know, those boundaries are, which I do also call sacred boundaries, because it's not about us just drawing a line in the sand. It's about us honoring ourselves, honoring our loved ones, honoring our enemies, whatever they may be, and paying attention in the present, their boundary as well. And as we mutually honor boundaries, they go beyond feelings. It's feelings come and they go. But if we become, in this way, we become more principle centered. And so and our principles are usually honored when we can express them, but we have to tap into them to know what they are first. And so because beyond principle, we can get swallowed up. And so that's just a glimpse of why it's beyond insight. I could go on and on, but I think I'm going really far. But it's day to day, non-linear experiencing deeper and deeper into who we are, and experiencing we're all love.
Yes, that's so good. Well, my dogs haven't stopped. I don't know if you can hear them in the background. Um, okay, good. Anyway, so yes, I think that's such a great example of really understanding. And there's so many ways that we think that if we've gone back in these old patterns that, we've lost all of our progress. And I think it's important for our listeners to understand that that's not actually the case, but this is kind of the opportunity where you can practice embodiment. So if you have these hiccups, you have these bumps in the road, you can continue to practice embodiment in those moments, and it becomes more and more natural. Let me take care of these dogs out here for 1 second, and I'll let you continue with this. So Cheri, this is the moment that we kind of get to choose that regulation versus reacting. So I think that you probably have more to say about that, and I'll take a quick pause.
I can even just talk about, experience I had in my dreams last night. One way we misinterpret love is through codependency, overgiving, overextending, grasping, like it's grasping at others to love on them. We think we're doing them a favor. And so, in I don't know if it's preparing for the show or it's on my own, continued growth, but I do know I have a tendency for codependency. Maybe we all do, but you're going to have some codependency and some degree of it in any relationship that you have. And so, especially within a family dynamic. And I had these different made up scenarios, because they weren't they weren't scenario memories, and of me pretty much grasping to love on my kids, love on my relationships. And I recognized, it was very disturbing because first I wanted to be really sad because the grasping was, it caused them to pull away. It caused them to like ignore me. It caused them to, it was like I wasn't even present. My needs were, my gift was not even received. And my first impulse in this dream was to feel sorry for myself and feel abandoned and alone because my intentions were all good and my actions were all good. I mean, everything I did was good. And so it, I wanted to be confused. And then, as maybe an hour after I woke up, just kind of disturbed by it, I remembered. I remembered, and I could see through their eyes. And I could see the message that I came from through their eyes. And that message was that I was being selfish. I was being not present, and I wasn't picking up on the cues that were appropriate. I wasn't honoring their boundaries, and that was really fascinating for me to like reflect on this coming through a dream. And so, and therefore I recognized I wasn't loving me. I was getting embroiled in that self-pity and that feeling of isolation. And then things opened up to me of like where I could put all that love at and all the in these creative, imaginative forces that I could immediately feel my being this morning. And one of it was, adding to what I wanted to share today on this podcast, and wanting to emanate this feeling of love that I feel right now. It was so healing. So to have my own love to be a healing force and maybe be able to teach me a lesson from my own dream was pretty fascinating. So that's kind of a real life thing that's just happening. I'm probably still processing through. And so I don't know if I'm really that clear, but what it did to my body is I woke up with an activated nervous system, feeling uncomfortable, actually aching in my body, and to feeling my nervous system completely calm down, feeling this different vibration in my body that was like a hug, and also an energized hug, and feeling this joy where I just automatically want to smile. And so that alone was evidence to me that I was becoming and present, and tapping into my ideal self. So there's a story. And so I think, you know, that's kind of a real life thing where I stepped away from the fear, intuited, and then stepped into that integration needs to happen. Now I need to embody.
Wow, beautiful, Cheri. Thank you. I love the moments that happen in real time when we get to share them on the podcast because life is happening in real time. And I feel like every time we talk about a topic, somehow life sort of filters into that topic. And I was saying that to my husband. Oh, each podcast we've had, I've been able to take something from or give a real life experience because it's happening in each moment. Thanks for sharing that. And it's beautiful. And we are still processing, everything as it happens. But what a beautiful way to see that. One thing that just jumped out at me was the boundaries on both sides. It was not only the boundaries with yourself, but then your children's boundaries that you also were honoring. And that is love when we are respecting all boundaries. Because if we aren't respecting someone else's, then it's not a true, clear, integrous version of love. And if we're not respecting our own, then it's not. So we have to work with both boundaries in a relationship. And that's something that takes practice for sure. Well, I know we have another break, so we'll jump into that. And when we come back, we have lots more to talk about.
See you in a moment.
Master of words, powerful player. What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace, all quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom, as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness: Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals.
Welcome back to Rooted and Rising with me, Dr. Cheri and Ellice Boone. I want to expand a little more on my example. It made me recognize some things that are traps that we fall into. When we're trying, when we're living life, to love, we think we're even following our intuition. When we think of loving on another person, we're following our intuition that they have a need. And in reality, it may be unresolved trauma cloaked into that feeling of intuition. And so I felt like my life situation and my role in the family, whether I was conditioned to do this or I took this on myself, my role was to put my needs aside and make room for everybody else and love on them. And when I didn't, I felt that there was like this covert punishment, like this guilt, I let someone down, and I projected that out. And so I was told that, and I can see the dynamics now, but I couldn't then. And so then my energy and my fuel would be anxiety. And that's where anxious attachments can happen, and so codependency is kind of a form of an anxious attachment. And so it can be other attachments, but that's one of them. And so, when we so what happens is our limbic brain, that is our baby brain, our lizard brain. That's the first part of our brain that forms, and it only knows immediate gratification, and that is pain, pleasure. So we tap into that limbic brain thinking it's intuition, which is really a more evolved brain, and we seek to get out of this pain and create pleasure. And so whatever that is, it's reactive. The fuel is anxiety. And so we're not present. We're functioning from the past, and we're chasing the future. And so that takes us out of embodiment. We're not in the body. We're not even in this world, really. And so as we stop and and become present, like your beautiful meditation did, and taught us, we slowing down regulates our nervous system. And then we can go back in, and we can then use that discernment we talked about in, do I really want to be behaving this way? Am I tapping into that love? And if we understand, and we can get familiar with that loving feeling, it becomes easier and easier. And then we're not deceived by what, trauma reaction is versus that intuition, because they can very much feel and look the same way. Most of our intentions with our relationships, if not all of them, are good. And so none of us are trying to be mean-spirited or causing uproar and chaos on purpose. And so when that's happening, we're probably not in the present, and therefore we've lost sense of our ideal self.
Wow, that was really a powerful portion of this. And just to distill it down, it seems so important to say, if we're in a reactive state, we're not embodied. We have to be present to be embodied. We have to be here in this exact moment to feel our true self. And as simple as that sounds, it's something that we often overlook and we don't do. But that is the fastest way to come back to embodiment, is to touch in with our present moment, our true self. And our true self, you've always said, is made up of love. It is pure love. And so if we're in that state, we can be responding to whatever the situation is from a completely different framework, a completely different lens, versus that trauma lens, where we're reactive and, we're making decisions in that way based on fight or flight or freeze or fawn. Instead of that, we're coming from a place of truth and clarity and presence. And that place is where we want to be making all of our big decisions, and relating to the people that we love, of course, because that's where repair comes in. That's where there can't be damage done if we're acting from a place of that love and that true self. So yeah, thank you. That felt like a really important piece. And the practicality of becoming embodied is as simple as the meditation we did today, or even shorter, just coming back to our breath. What am I feeling?
Yes, and I'm sorry I interrupted you, but you're right. I just want to say, and it's okay if that's not simple,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
trauma can make a breath complicated, and we've talked about that before. But it's so I just people you can it's easy when your trauma is fresh or it feels overriding in the moment, that simple can be triggering and feel like, "Ah, what's wrong with me?" And we want to respect all the processes that we're in. And like I shared before, is that's why healing is and traveling into becoming is not linear. Even breath can trigger the trauma. Therefore, it feels like even harder. And that's okay too. It's just like, be curious again about all of it, but just recognizing the avenue you're going to is that inner integrity, and knowing that you'll get there. You'll get there. And so, it's, want it to happen, we can make it happen. And just embrace the journey as well, not just the
Hmm.
destination. It's all important.
Yeah, thank you. That piece again is so important. The gentleness with ourselves and the curiosity. We've talked about that in so many of the episodes because it's such an important role. It's childlike curiosity comes from such an innocent and loving space. So if we can have that around our process, even if just breathing feels hard or confronting, because of trauma, because of where we're at in our process or our journey, that's also okay. So just knowing that every piece, every part, every step is okay and it's beautiful. So it's a good reminder. Thanks for bringing that in too. I think we kind of are moving into the direction of, we talked a little bit about boundaries. Another thing I wanted to bring in regarding boundaries is that I think it's very common, especially for women, but for men and women, to think that love, sort of have this like vision of love as if it's this thing where you are self-sacrificing. And yes, it's important to give in a relationship. But when you're giving to the point of actually sacrificing your own needs, and sacrificing your truth, that is where it becomes unhealthy and not actual love. And so I think it's just something that this boundary piece feels really important for so many people, to bring up that boundaries are an act of love in itself. And that can apply towards someone else's boundaries and respecting them, or towards the boundaries we're creating for ourselves. So I think just wanting to say that and really, just highlight how important boundaries are, and that instead of it being a punishment, like you spoke of before, it is something that it encourages true relating. It encourages being present with what your needs are and being able to communicate those. That is an act of love. It's a love to you and to your partner or whoever you're in relationship with.
No,
So,
and I think that's a very good point to bring up. I think, when, I have my codependency example, but, it's even deeper than that. It's said that in the archetypal world that we have three archetypes that we all have. And I think this is a really good leeway to talk about this. And those are, we all have a betrayer, we all have a prostitute, and we all have a victim. And all those archetypes are just exactly what Elise was talking about, where we lose sight of boundaries and the give and take, and we lose sight of being principle centered. And so when we were present and we're principle centered, there's no performance. All those
mm-hmm.
archetypes require a role. So we're performing, and when we're performing, and we're not being authentic and genuine. And so we're playing a role versus being our ideal self. And we're stepping away from who we are. Therefore, we don't know ourselves anymore. And so so we're just playing this game, this illusion, and like a stage show for somebody else. And so, and we're usually miserable, yeah. And obviously the prostitute is giving too much. The victim is not, is not giving enough. And the betrayer is going contrary to everything principle we live, one or all of them. And so, they are really good guidelines for us to check in and say, okay, am I being a victim right now? Am I giving and like prostituting myself? And ooh, did that really, slash my own wrist? Why am I doing this? These are pretty graphic examples, but there's something to give our get our attention. We need to like wake up and recognize that those are all harming ourselves. And so much of our loving is tending to, give the other person, not harm them. But we only can give what we give to ourselves. So that's another way. If we are harming ourselves, we're really not. They're not receiving the message of love.
Mm-hmm.
They may receive the message of weight. They may receive the message of, ooh, this is too much. They may receive the message of confusion. They may receive the message of a chaos. And then we get that reflected back to us, and it creates chaos for us because we are confused, and we're, and feeling, okay, we just wrote the script. I am the victim. And then it's helpless and hopeless. And we can sense the cycle right there.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Wow. So true. All of that. And yeah, those examples are drastic, but I think it's important to kind of think about those, ponder on it just a little bit, because what is it like to abandon ourselves? What does that feel like? And it shows up. It shows up in our bodies. It shows up in our actions. And so it's so important. It's more important than we might give it credit for, to really take ownership of being present with ourselves, understanding what our boundaries are, and coming back to that place of love where we can be present and express our love in a way that's true and real and authentic to us, and not performative, not out of obligation, not out of, being the martyr, because that's a role we play, just out of pure access to the true self. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, I also kind of want to move into having the courage to do these things. Take courage. I don't think that it's something that comes easily to everyone. Maybe it comes easily to no one. I'm not sure. But having the courage to speak our boundaries, speak to what our needs are, having the courage to stay in a relationship when it gets hard, or to walk away when it's not aligned. Um, I think a lot of people assume that a good relationship nowadays, they're like, oh, it just has to be easy. If it's not easy, then I'm out of here. And there's something to be said for that culture of just kind of disposable, everything's disposable. Relationships are disposable. But the effort that it takes to stay in and move through conflict is what truly builds, the character and the depth and the richness that relationships can offer long term, when you push through the difficulties, the challenges, the conflicts, and there's repair. So it does take some courage, and I'm curious a little bit to, if you have anything more to say about what that looks like. How do we find that courage to stay, and yeah, is there anything that you want to add to that piece?
Yes, I think that goes back to, the more we get familiar with the love that we have within ourselves. I mean, like really familiar with that feeling, the love becomes a courage. and the picture becomes clear. We step out beyond the story, and we're above the story. We're beyond the story, and we can see with compassion what the relationship has to offer. And we can talk more in deep about that if we have time once we get back from this. I see that we need a break, so let's go for the break.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Master of words, powerful player. What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace. All quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom, as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life.
Welcome back to Rooted and Rising. We've been talking about love and the power of love and how to embody love. And right before the break, we begin talking about how that shows up in relationships, and especially if life's not perfect, so there's conflict, and sometimes we have to. The lifelong contract is a time limited contract, and sometimes it's feels like a time limited contract and it's a lifelong contract, and how do we get through that? And so what I just want to say about that is it goes back to us getting in touch with our own love energy. All the tools we talked about, and even it begins with breath, is just so important, because then when we're there, we're present in our relationship because we're present with ourselves. And we've already done the sacred boundaries, and we have the virtue of patience. We recognize this is a journey. This is an incident that's happening, and at least you talked about before the break that today's society is a disposable society, and I know divorce rates are higher than ever, and there are countries where people aren't getting relationships anymore. They're getting AI relationships instead, or no relationships, and so it's not only disposable, but people are like scared of relationships or have lost sight of how to have a relationship and the value of relationships. And a lot of it is because it seems hard, and conflict does happen in relationships, and I kind of get scared when people tell me they have no conflict, because we come together with different backgrounds, different sexes, sometimes same sexes. We come together with different values of upbringing, a childhood that we didn't know each other with. So how can we think alike on everything? That's not possible. So if we are in our body and we are honoring our love and our integrity, we are going to have conflict. And that's beautiful, because we can learn from one another. We can grow. We can gain from diversity. Now, contentiousness is something else. Contentiousness is selfishness. This is reaction, trauma reaction from the past, and maybe fear of the future. And this is with mean spirit and ill intent. And that's when you are legitimately being victimized, not being a victim, and you need to be able to discern that. And if you stay in your sense of is, you can discern that, and it won't take courage. It'll just be a matter of fact. This is not what I want. This is not alignment. We're not aligned. I'm not going to tell you how to be, but I'm not going to align with this. And it sounds like it takes courage, but when we're convicted, courage comes second. It just happens naturally. And we have to deal with, it doesn't mean we don't deal with loss and grief. And that is hard. And so that's part of maturing, because we can have scary moments and have to find that courage for that. And life is full of that. And so, this is why it's not linear, and this is why it's a one step at a time. And sometimes we think we got this mastered, and then we can't find breath. And so that is part of the fractal nature of us. We're all a bunch of fractals, and a different part of us can be resurrected that isn't really completed. A memory could come that's not really completed. It could be a new fractal that's happening, and we got to heal from that. And so how do we stay in love with ourselves when we are fractured again? And so all this is very complicated, and we will probably get into more of this as we go in more episodes, but it's a journey. So just remember, it's a journey. There is no real failure as long as you're still putting one step in front of the other.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you, Cheri. That's so true. And I think it can feel scary. As we mentioned, our society can feel like relationships are not as important or never good enough because we have so much comparison. And at the same time, the way to truly grow is to have a reflection in another human. And to have that reflection over and over again will continuously help our growth. And if we can work on repair, if we can work on conflict resolution, then we can build those qualities, which are also so rich and so full and will be beneficial in all relationships. So not running away, but also there's a truth piece there of like finding what's true and aligned for you. If you're in a relationship and something that is not moving forward and you are actually being victimized in a way, and you're not safe, that is something you need to move out of. But the only way to know is to come in touch with that true self, to know. And you do know, your body knows. So open up that conversation with your body. If your mind is going round and round in circles with all these different things, reasons, it's so confusing, stop and check in with your body. What does it tell you? And you should have a much more clear answer with practice listening to your body's cues. I think we got to wrap it up. So I want to give some journal prompts to everyone for this week. The journal prompts for this week, hopefully, and as we always say, we want to take you into a place where you can really allow the subconscious to express itself here. So free writing is a great way to do that. If you want to set a timer for a few minutes, it can be hard for some people, and that's okay. Just start somewhere and build from there. The journal prompts for this week are: where am I being asked to choose love with clarity instead of fear or obligation? The next one is: what boundary would most support my nervous system right now? And the final one: how does choosing from alignment feel in my body compared to choosing from self-abandonment? So if those resonate for you, please sit down, take a moment to write some of your thoughts, reflect back on them. And as always, we hope that you've gained something from this episode, taken away a little tidbit for yourself, or at least had a moment of quiet and presence in the meditation. And we look forward to diving in next week on a new topic. And please like and subscribe to this podcast if you enjoyed it. We really appreciate our listeners. You are literally the reason why we are here and speaking on all of these topics, to offer a little insight to each of you. So thank you for joining us today. Go ahead, Cheri.
I say thank you. I just want you to today send our love to you.
Absolutely. So until next time, stay rooted
and keep on rising.
This has been Rooted and Rising with hosts Dr. Cheri and Ellice Boone. Through honest conversation, clinical insight, and creative reflection, Dr. Cheri and Ellice will empower you to reclaim your voice, your vitality, and your vision. This podcast is not about quick fixes. It's a return to deep knowing, gentle unraveling, and lifelong integration. Tune in each week, Wednesdays, 12 noon Eastern,